this is Cam, and welcome to another episode of the Quarantine Series. This is one, as my dog jumps in the background there, Millie.
Hey, Millie.
This is probably one of my favorite thing to do is talk and share the story of KenTay Lee. And I'm so excited that we get to introduce you to so many of my friends and family, KenTay, and hear your powerful story. We're going to break this into three parts. And so, but KenTay Lee, at the age of 14, was sentenced to life in prison without parole and served 21 years in prison until, many people, a group, the Equal Justice Initiative, helped get him out. And January of 2020, he was released. And we're going to just tell his story, or he's going to share his story. And so I'm excited to join you, KenTay Lee. Obviously, you've picked up technology quick, that you already know how to use your iPhone and you know how to do backdrop.
Oh, actually, things, when you have lived the way I've lived, you adapt very well and very quickly, surprisingly to me. Yeah, I'm getting it. There's still some challenges, but not.
So what year did you go in prison?
So I went to prison January the 8th, 1999.
So, I mean, cell phones were just, there were bag phones. There weren't big, cell phones. So technology has just gone crazy.
What I remember is that the thing that was out when I was out was a church phone. And so they were like Nextel church phones. So they weren't like really, really wide at the time. So people like literally still had beepers. So,
So let's learn a little bit about your story. Where did you grow up?
So I was born at Carolina Medical Center in Charlotte, North Carolina. To my mother, Pamela LaVon Brown, and my father, Donald Ray Lee Sr. So that was in.
Who raised you?
So my mother, I lived in the household with my mother and my father initially, and then relationship problems separated them. It was a lot of stuff going on with them emotionally and physical abuse and mental abuse. They didn't have the tools to navigate. So they separated, and so it was basically my mother. For the majority of my very, very young years. And so that was a lot for her to navigate. And,
how old were you when your father left? Or they separated?
I believe when they separated, I had to be about 2 or 3 years old.
Was he involved in your life growing up at all?
So yes, my father did make attempts, and he did make efforts to be in me and my brother's life. There was actually a time where he was so frustrated by not being able to be with me and my brother that he actually took us. So he just came and got us, and we left. We didn't know what was going on because we were really, really small. But we were like going to hotel rooms, and we were like traveling and moving around. And so years later.
How old were you?
I was about 2 or 3. Years later, though, we found out that he wasn't supposed to have us then. So it was a thing where he really did try, but my father was disabled. He had no way of being able to take care of himself. Of course, he couldn't take care of 2 children, but he made attempts to be in our lives. He did.
Yeah. So tell me an early good memory that you have, just of your, 6, 7, 8 years old. Do you remember a special vacation, birthday party?
Well, the only best birthday, and I call it my best birthday that I remember, is that I actually had a birthday cake. I actually had presents and friends in the backyard at State Street. So this was the first time. We never lived in an apartment. We finally got a duplex, and that was like a really, really big step up.
Wow.
And it was a big deal. So we had just moved in, and I had like my 5th or 6th birthday that was coming up. and we had a birthday party in the backyard. And I remember that was the most special, best birthday that I had, because we never really had a lot to celebrate with.
Yeah.
And so, I didn't know any different. I didn't know anything different. So, I did notice that we did go to other people's birthday parties, but it was usual for me to not really expect too much as a child. It became very, very usual for me. And I think, at a very early age, I started to realize how different we lived compared to other people. Very early. And so this
When you
is
say,
around.
KenTay, when you say different, did you know you were poor?
No, so that's like a whole. When the realization hits you that you're poor, is usually when you're around your other friends, the other children.
Yeah.
And so it was probably around the second grade. No, it was earlier than that. It was probably around the third grade.
So, so,
Uh,
tell me, so tell me about elementary. Any success in school? Did you ever feel, and where did you go to elementary school in Charlotte? Do you ever feel like, were your grades good, your behavior good? I mean, tell me, what was your status there? How'd you feel about elementary school?
so when I was very young, I went to preschool. And I had a teacher named Miss Grape. I remember her name. She had a wig. I did not like Miss Grape. We didn't get along, but I remember Miss Grape to this day. But we went to preschool. In preschool, we wore uniforms. So we were lucky enough to go to a preschool where all of the kids wore the same thing. If you fast forward, and I'm going to my first day of kindergarten, where we don't wear uniforms, then it becomes a little bit more apparent that things are different for us than it is for the other kids. It's not that we weren't poor when I was very young. It's just that we couldn't tell the difference because they tried to make the status of all the children the same. And so by doing that, we really didn't know. So all of the kids were pretty much equal, but I still was distributing behavior problems, communication problems. At a very young age, I was not able to receive touch. So I was very, very sensitive to touch. I did not like to be touched. I did not like to talk. I talked very little, as much as little as possible. And there were very few people who could communicate with me. One being my mother, or those of my close family who had grown with me. And so that's trouble in school. That's trouble in school, because when you're trying to learn things and you can't communicate what you've learned, then there seems to be a deficit in how you learn. And so we noticed this at a very early age, because there were attempts to try to get me to communicate, to get me to.
So you say, did you go to the principal's office a lot? Were you, what was,
Well, no, it was just that what they would attempt to do would try to separate me and try to get me to talk in different settings, with like teachers and parents and those things. But it was so, my life at home was so chaotic that school became not a place of learning. It became a place where I would eat, where I would rest. And so it was just basic for me. When I went to school, that would be the time where I would get my rest, my sleep, and I could actually maybe enjoy myself. But it was not for learning, it
did, did,
was.
did you like school?
I liked school because it wasn't home. So I liked school as opposed to home, because home was like a war zone. So I was born on Boone Street, in Charlotte in 1984. So the crack epidemic had probably been in for about maybe a year. It hadn't really taken off in Charlotte. Maybe in other major cities it had, but not in Charlotte. And I was born into this. I'm pretty sure we don't, records aren't the same as they are today. I'm pretty sure that when I was born with cocaine in my system. And so that just puts it in a context for you. It was a place where I had no place of rest there. I was just born into utter chaos. And by being born into utter chaos, that just trickled down to the children. When the adults aren't stable, when the adults are distributing behaviors in front of the children that aren't, that aren't teaching them good characters, it just trickled down to the children. So every day I would go outside and try to play with these kids who lived right across the parking lot. But somehow they had a better status than we did. So they had more than we had. So they would eat chicken. They would eat fried chicken. And that would be a symbol for us. Like, we couldn't eat fried chicken every night. There were some nights we didn't have meat. There were some nights we didn't have what we needed. And that, like, the water would be cut off. The lights would be cut off. We would have roaches. We would have rats. We would be infested with all type of things in our house. And so that was a status for the children. And so when we attempted to be friends with those children immediately knew that we were worse than them, that they were better than us. And in that environment, all we knew was what we saw. And so that turned into a cycle of playing and fighting every day. So I had to fight to go to the school bus. I had to fight to go outside and play. They would always use an occasion to deceive me because I was so willing to have friends. I wanted to have friends bad. I wanted to be one of the team, peer pressure. And so by doing that, they would trick me over and over again. And I would be like physically hurt. I remember one time they tricked me into sticking a stick down a hole, but it was a wasp nest. And the wasp came out and they stung me in my eyes. And I'm pretty sure my face was very, very swollen because I could not see. And my face was super, super hot. And it hurt very bad. And from that day, my mother would not let me go outside alone for about 2 to 3 years after that. I could not play in the neighborhood. I could not.
Did you have any success academically in school?
No. So that was, I could not read. So actually, I was illiterate all the way up until the age of 14 because, again, school was not a place to learn. School was a place for me to rest and to get whatever food I could get, or clothes, because the Lost and Found just happened to be a place where you could shop. You could get clothes where other kids had and try to look normal instead of wearing the same 2 or 3 hand-me-downs that I had. So that puts it really in perspective because that's hard to navigate as a child.
So where did you go to high school, and for how long did you go to high school?
Okay, so after middle school, I had this bright idea that things were different. Things are going to be different now. I'm older. I'm more in control of my destiny. I can think. I can go as I please. So I arrived at Myers Park High School in 1998. And in 1998, it was like the school year started maybe in August, maybe. And the very first day I got to school and got off of the bus, I was walking down the mall. I was just looking around. I was amazed at what this looked like. We had never even went through the neighborhood for trick-or-treating or Christmas lights or anything. So I had never seen anything like this. I didn't know that this existed in Charlotte. I literally had lived on the west side of Charlotte my entire life. The only place that I had ever went to outside of that was downtown with my mother or shopping with my mother. And so I arrived at Myers Park and immediately the kids, the older kids, they were bigger than me because I was underweight. They immediately went in on my clothes. Like they was like, yeah. And they made me feel so bad about my clothing that I think I cut class. They gave me my schedule. I went to every class one day, and then I cut every class after that. And it was T-minus 2 weeks, and high school was over. High school was absolutely more of a social environment that I had never navigated, and it was the end of it for me. It was the end of it for me.
At age 14, your freshman year in high school, you're basically running the streets of Charlotte.
So at the age of 14, now this is I'm running the streets way before 14, so it's like 10. It's like age 10 when I figure out that damn, I can't stay here and I can't continue to do this because this is not good for me. So in an attempt to try to seize whatever piece I could, I started to learn how to. I started working at a convenience store, making a little bit of food here, a little bit of money there. And the store clerk, she would help me to like buy presents and stuff for Christmas, and she would help with things like that. But she would make sure that I could eat. She would make sure that I could take my brother something to eat, or that he could come to the store and get something to eat because we lived right around the corner. But she knew. And now this was crazy about that. She was from Africa. She came over here from Africa. She was from a very poor country. So she had come over all type of boundaries, and I had no way of knowing this. And she saw me and realized how much of a crisis that I was in. And she said in her her thick, beautiful accent, she would say, you come to my store, you work for me, you bag the ice. She would have very little things for me to do. And then she would always say, don't drink the soda until after you finish with your work. Because she know that I sneak in the back and I give me a choice soda or something. You know, I'm a kid, so.
So you're arrested, and what were you charged with?
So at the time of my arrest, I was arrested on January the 8th, 1999. It was about 7:00 at night. They put handcuffs on me. They came and got me, and they just arrested me. Now, days prior to that, something had happened, and I'm not fully aware of what has happened because it has not. I have not processed it. I do not know anything but how to survive. I don't know anything but how to instinctively behave. And so they arrested me and they charged me with first-degree murder, armed robbery with a dangerous weapon. That would later lead to to a sentence of life without parole, plus 9 to 7 years, and later I would get 9 to 11 months. To put that sentence in perspective, because a lot of people believe that life without parole is 25 years and then you get parole. To put it in perspective, the years would read on the computer as 999, 998 in years, not months. This is the only.
You were basically sentenced to die in prison, correct?
I was sentenced to die in prison without absolutely knowing this at the time.
At age 14. So another interesting part, there was another young guy with you. What was his sentence?
Terrence Henderson, he was my best friend at the time. They later would offer him a plea for second-degree murder and armed robbery with a dangerous weapon. He would receive a sentence of 18 and a half years to 21 years. And he was released. He was released in 18 and a half years.
Yeah. And I got to meet him. He's just a great guy doing wonderful things with his life. He was a big part of getting out, being there. But can you tell us, or do you mind sharing why the differences in the two sentences, his and yours?
In my experience, and just what I know, it was my zip code. It was the fact that I didn't have parents. It was the fact that we could not see a future for me. And it was the fact that there was a rhetoric at the time that was being spoken loudly that I could not have known the political climate. They were speaking this rhetoric of super predators, children who would be so dangerous to society that they would actually be even worse than the worst criminals. They would be the new wave of criminals, like the new improved criminals. And so this rhetoric, it followed Ronald Reagan. It followed the war on drugs. It's consistent with all of the policies that came from that. So I was actually, before I even committed a crime, I was actually sentenced before the crime even happened, because under the structured sentence law, they had already made sentences for crimes that people hadn't even committed yet. So they used this when they was trialing me with a lot of other interesting things that they did to sentence me. So it was a combination of strategy. It was a combination of the political climate and also my economical status. And the crime itself was over sensationalized. Again, we go back years later and we look at it, and I know from the beginning that, hey, I can't be guilty of this type of crime. We have to at least understand what happened. And we were forced into a situation where we were about to be sexually assaulted, or we were being sexually positioned in a way that we felt threatened. Well, this just wasn't something that we knew that we could understand.
But you were 14 years old, and you're in police custody, and you're being charged with a crime. And then where were you, and when you were convicted, where did you go first? Was it Western Youth Institute first? Was that your first stop?
After my conviction, so I stayed in a detention center for about a year and a half. And after my conviction, I was sent directly to Western Youth. So I was, they waited until I turned 16. I had to stay in the county jail. They would not put me in Western Youth until after I had turned 16, because I was underweight. I was too small to go to Western Youth, which was gladiator school. So if you were a youth, this was the absolute worst place that you can go in North Carolina at the time. There's no worse place that you could go. And I was too small to go, so they factored that in. They said, "Oh, okay, we're going to wait until you gain a little bit of weight. We're going to wait until you get a little older, and then we're going to send you to Western Youth." So I arrived at Western Youth 7 days after my 16th birthday.
And that's where we met on a weekend there. At what point did it hit you, man, I'm in prison and for the rest of my life?
So I never initially believed that, because I mean, even during trial, I was like, they can't send me to prison for the rest of my life. I'm just a kid, this is not possible. That's not possible. And so it was at the moment that I was sentenced and the judge said that I had the sentence that I had, that I was like, it was really weird, because my mind could not understand it. I had only lived 14 years. I don't understand time the same way as everybody. So I had literally fought from birth to the age of 14. Trauma, abuse. And at the age of 14, or a situation where I felt at least I had control in it, I could at least defend myself. I came to find that this was a crime, and I was being told that this was a crime, and I was being told that I was guilty of this crime, and I was being told that I should feel remorseful for this crime, and I was being told that I am the worst person in society. And so by the time I get to prison, I had definitely went through a tremendous change, because the detention center was the first place where I could sleep, eat, get up, and not have to worry about fighting, and not have to worry about abuse. I wouldn't have to worry about whether or not, we were going to get bit by rats, or we were going to have roaches crawling in our ears or in our shoes when we went to school, or holes in our clothes. So this was the first place where I actually had the chance to slow down and see who I actually was, because it was nothing but go all the way until I was arrested. And even it took a time after that. It took a time after that for me to surface, for me to even remember who I was before any of this happened. So
Well, let me, as we wrap up, kind of part one of this, I want to share a little bit of how we connected. I was invited to go on Epiphany ministry, a church ministry to Western Youth, and I did not want to go. I tried every way to get out of it possible. And my church and friends at church, they peer pressured me into doing this. And right before we go into Western Youth, we're matched up with inmates, and they tell us who we're going to be matched up with. And the chaplain comes into the room and says, before we start, says, I want to tell you about one person. His name is KenTay Lee. He's life without parole. He'll never get out of prison. Just want y'all to know his story. But here's who you're matched up with. Camcorder, you're matched up with KenTay Lee. And I looked at the guy that invited me, and I went, I'm going home. I'm not going to get matched up with the hardest thug in this joint. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it. I didn't pay for this. I didn't, and they calmed me down. And we do this thing at the beginning of it where we're all in a line and y'all walk in the room and we're all singing and clapping. And I just remember all these guys walking in the room, and they looked like they walked into my YMCA every day. Y'all were just babies. And you didn't look anything like my preconceived notion that I expected you to look. And you were so little, and you had these little glasses on, and we went over in the corner and met, and we connected on day one. I mean, I could feel it. And you're one of your first words to me, and I'm going to end this episode because this is the Bible story, and I don't want to get too emotional, but we're sitting there chatting, getting to know each other, and I'm not supposed to share a lot of who I am and what I'm doing there, but you said, you may not even remember this, but you said, do you think I'm going to hell? And I said, KenTay, I don't know. What do you think? And you went, Jeremiah 29:11, God's got a plan for me. I'm here for a reason. And maybe I got to find out that reason. Maybe I'm to lead other inmates to Christ. And I mean, my heart was beating out of my chest. And I'm sitting there, and I remember going to the hotel that night going, I'm supposed to minister to this kid, and he's ministered to me in the first 30 seconds that we're together. And you've done it. You've done it so much for 20 years. Go ahead.
In life, I remember, and I still have the picture of when we were young. So I had hair, and I had no facial hair. Like, I was just getting a little bit of, and so I remembered learning how to read. And I remember the first book that I read was the Bible. I struggled so bad, even with 3-syllable words. I struggled so bad. But I struggled all the way through the Bible, and that was a scripture that meant the absolute most to me, because even to this day, there's something in us, even when situations are hopeless, that still moves our gears. It still motivates us. And even at that age, even being that young, I knew that there was circumstances in which God could intervene that would just simply make no sense. And I believed that God had a plan for me. I had come to terms with my sentence, but I believed that God was going to use my appeals. There was a way for God to do this, because they convinced me that these appeals would work. That was 3 denied appeals.
Yeah, man, those are heartbreaking for us. Yeah, I remember. I kept up with you. Yeah, I was keeping up with you.
Yes.
But I really, we're gonna dive in deeper in part 2 to rest of some more of your life. And I appreciate everybody that has taken the time to watch, close to 30 minutes of the first part of KenTay's story. I hope you share this YouTube link with your friends and your family so everybody can understand KenTay's story. But there are kids everywhere with this story that are not only walking in our YMCAs and our schools and our churches and in our communities everywhere, but they're there. And so, but we're gonna, and then I hope you come back for part 2 to hear more, because you're gonna be blessed to hear more of his story, just like I've been blessed to have our friends.
Yes.
So again, KenTay, thanks for part 1, and everybody, thank you for being part of this.
Thank you.